On today's Clean Sheet of Ice, the Texas Hockey Podcast, we will be discussing whether or not the Dallas Stars should be making another trade before the trade deadline next week, a week from today, than when you're listening this. We're going to recap the Columbus game. Unfortunately, it wasn't a great game, but we're coming back home, and we're going to preview the LA Kings game tonight in American Airlines Center. They're back home. First time since Four Nations break that the Stars will be back. Today's podcast is sponsored by Zing Zang. Zing Zang is America's #1 Bloody Mary mix. So if you need Bloody Mary mix, go get Zing Zang. Everyone loves it in America, and you should too. They've got ready-to-drink cans as well with the Bloody Mary mix and alcohol already infused in the cans. So if you need to go tailgate, get on the run with the Bloody Mary from Zing Zang, they've got the ready-to-drink cans. Shout out to Zing Zang and shout out to our daily fantasy sponsor, Prize Picks. Use code Apollo when you sign up and get up to $100 matched on your first deposit. Prize Picks is a daily fantasy app where you hit more or less on every player, every night, every game, every stat. Shout out to Prize Picks, shout out to Zing Zang, and shout out to you, Dom Garcia. How are we doing, bud?
You know what? Stars are finally back home. It feels like it's been a while. I'm doing a lot better. I'm excited to see the home crowd. I'm excited to see our Dallas Stars against a very scrappy LA Kings team.
Yeah, it should be a fun one. The Kings, they started off pretty hot, and then obviously they had the injury to Drew Doughty, but he's back, and I think he missed last night's game with a little injury management maybe. We'll see if he ends up playing on Friday, but Stars are relatively healthy. I know Bishop, Miro, Nils, and Sagan are out, but three of those we knew were kind of happening, and then Bishop added to the mix there. It's kind of unfortunate for the defensive side, but before we get into that, we had some news yesterday or the day before. There was an article that I came across my Score app, and apparently Seth Jones is ready to leave Chicago, and I don't blame him. It's just not a competitive roster. They fired their coach earlier this season. It's just not a great organization to be a part of right now. It used to be. Now it's not. Seth Jones, he's got his big payday. He's making $9.5 million a year for the next, 4 years, something like that, 4 or 5 years. And he's got his payday, but he's kind of rotting away in Chicago, and he wants to go play for a contender. He's like 30 years old, so he's still got some good years of hockey left in him. He used to be one of the premier defensemen, but reportedly he wants to go play in Dallas, his hometown. He's from Arlington, so he's a DFW kid, and he wants to come play for the hometown Dallas Stars. However, the Stars only have $4.6 million in cap space right now. They still haven't decided to put Miro Heiskanen on LTIR, so that would free up another $8.5 million for the rest of the season, but I would like Seth Jones, but I need his contract brought down to like 75% in order for him to come to Dallas.
Yeah, this story really picked up. I guess it was a little bit of a slow day, but I was seeing like national reporters talking about it, and basically he wants to go to a contender, and he did get the payday, but with Chicago, they draft really well. It's just I don't see that. I mean, the clock's ticking with him, and he sees his home as a cup ready scenario. Player for player, like if we just had, the cap situation figured out, I would love it. But yeah, it's very interesting talk. I mean, gosh, forever we heard about big game hunting. And every time we heard big game hunting, somebody on the Dallas Stars kind of stepped up and kind of pushed back and said, "Hey, man, we got the guys right here in this club." But yeah, it's also nice to see that like NHL players view Dallas as a win now scenario. I'm kind of doing that with my Rockets, and I think KD's going to your Mavericks. But
Yeah,
it's nice to be talked about, if that makes sense. So, what worried me was like how you would facilitate that deal. I'm interested to see what you think. Like, what could we possibly do to make that deal? If Seth Jones, great player, I would love him in our system, but just making that deal it would have to take a masterclass by Jim Nill.
it's hard to do unless you put Miro on LTIR, and then if you do that, what is the cap retention going to be like? Does Chicago have cap retention spots right now? You only get 3 per team. Obviously, they're retaining part of Rantanen's salary for this season. I don't know what other retention they already have on the books, but if you can get if you can get half of the retention on there, and then you trade either Lyubushkin or Dumba in that situation, then you're looking at bringing in $1 million over what you already had. So that's not killing your cap for the next season or two. You're still able to sign Wyatt and look at Logan in the next season. And you can get through all of those contracts, not like easily in any way, shape, or form. Jim Nill is a very good GM, and obviously Janko is a great capologist for the Stars, and they have their ways to do it. But you have to get that retention down to half before even having that conversation of what's going in the trade. Like that's just plain and simple. You're not taking in $9.5 million for a 30-year-old defenseman under contract for 5 more seasons at $9.5 million, which is the same amount that Jamie Benn is getting. Obviously, he's going to be less than that, but you can't bring in someone that's making $9.5 million. You just can't. You can't do it.
Yeah, and that's kind of just the general talk of like Dallas Stars and this year's trade deadline. It's like if we had room to make it, we'd be making it, but also we don't want to just completely go LA Rams and just drop everything for this one because you don't have to. You have lower 20-year-old stars that's going to carry this team for a long time. They can carry the team now and in the future. Why even risk that scenario? But so I asked. So if you're not in the Stars Hockey Twitter group, you should. It's a great group. I asked a lot of people just for their general sense, what would it take to get Seth Jones in a Dallas Stars uniform? And I think the best answer I got was realistically 30 to 50% retention and probably Maverick Borg or maybe even Stankoven.
I don't know if it
Another
would take that.
another answer I got, basically, really the talk was like, Dumba was the answer, but all the trouble you'll have to go through and the way Dumba's playing right now, like, is the lemon worth the squeeze? And that's going to be the answer. That's going to be the question you have to answer. And you only have like a week in time. So it's, I trust Jim Nill and anything he does, but man, it's like, I don't even know how you make the deal.
Yeah, and Jim Nill's biggest thing heading into this trade season that we've been in for the last 3 months because of Sagan's injury and now Miro's injury, like the story was he's not giving up Stankoven, Bork, or Bischel. He won't do it. He's just not going to do it because finding good players on entry level contracts when being a contender each and every year, which meaning your pick is in the late 20s or early 30s, is it's just it's irresponsible to give up the cheapest assets that you have. Like they're making minimum salary, entry level salary, so 925,000 or 875,000. I don't know what the number is, but under $1 million, and they're making that salary for the first 2 to 3 seasons of their NHL career. And to have that to be able to pair with the Jamie Benn and the Tyler Seguin contracts, and now the Rupe Hintz, Miro Heiskanen, Jason Robertson, Jake Ottinger, like you've got a lot of $8 million+ deals now on the table, and Thomas Harley's going to need a new one after next season. Jason Robertson's going to need a new one after next season, I believe, and Wyatt Johnston's going to need one after this season. It's hard to have entry level talent on this squad that is actually going to contribute at a fairly high rate. Like Maverick Bork has been really good this past month. Logan Stankoven's been good all season, even though the numbers don't show it. Bischel's been great for the last month or so that he's been up. And to give up one of those assets to bring in an aging, really good defenseman, like he was elite level, he was top, I don't know, call it 8, top 10 defenseman in the NHL for a good period of time there. He's a great offensive defenseman. He's a big right-handed defenseman, which is all things that the Stars would love to have on their squad. The problem is like if you're not giving up Bischel, Bork, or Stankoven, the trade is going to take a different NHL player on your team, Lyubushkin, Dumba, to free up room on the right side. And they've both been like, I know Dumba hasn't had a great season, but the last week he's been very good. Lyubushkin's been pretty good all season. He got a little banged up and he's been a little bit hobbled, I'd say, over the last 2 weeks. And it's unfortunate, but he's still been really good for the team. So how much more are you getting from Seth Jones in a trade if you give up one of those guys? Is the offensive production going to be significantly better? Although, I mean, Lyubushkin's hadn't scored a goal all season. Dumba has like 1 goal maybe and a few assists there. And he's been picking up his defensive side. So I think defense, you're not losing anything by giving up one of those guys and bringing in Seth Jones, but offensively, I think you gain a little bit more. However, if you're doing Labushkin or Dumba, you're adding a first or second round pick or multiple picks at that rate in order to get the salary down, and probably a prospect as well. Is that worth it? Is that the win now move? Like, I think you made a win now move, and now your next win now move is going to be Miro, Tyler, everybody coming back from injury.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, this with the banged up stars right now, this is as hard of a every single game is going to be as hard as it possibly can. The idea of Miro coming back for the playoffs, the idea of Sagan coming back for the playoffs is a trade in itself. Like, plus you don't have to give up anything. So, I mean, I'm even with the lineup we have now, hoping Bishop comes back soon, but I'm not scared of like, I think we can get some points easily right now with how bad and injured we are. And then when we get those guys back, like it's a bunch of hassle for benefit that it's just not a guarantee. And if you don't have a clear guarantee, like this is going to make moves, you might want to just stay packed.
Yeah. And it was reported that by Robert Tiffin when he talked to Tyler Sagan in the press box in Anaheim over the West Coast road trip before Four Nations break that he started skating. He's not practicing with the team, obviously, but starting skating in February as opposed to March, I think is a huge win because his timeline was 4 to 6 months from December, like early December. So you're looking at April, really, at the earliest, and late April, May, probably realistically from that injury. But him skating in February as opposed to March, I think that's a big sign that they're pretty confident, and them not putting Miro Heiskanen on LTIR. Obviously, they got to be as close to the cap as they can before they put someone on LTIR because that maximizes the amount of cap space they can use. So it still could happen. We have a week until the trade deadline. We're recording this Thursday, February 27th. So when you're listening to this, it comes out Friday. It's a week away. They could put Miro on LTIR and then make a big move. And then I don't know what the big move is because Erik Karlsson was shut down by Jim Nill pretty much immediately from Sean Shapiro when he called him this past week. And he's at $11.5 million or $10.5 million, just a giant contract for the next 3 or 4 seasons. And another aging defenseman, right-handed defenseman that would fit the system and would be pretty good in it. However, the contract is not going to work. That is the biggest hurdle that the Stars have to make is what do they want to do? Because there aren't that many UFAs that are really worth bringing in at this point left, I believe, with the Granlund and CC trade. Like you shored up like your forward depth and you added a right-handed defenseman or a left-handed defenseman. I can't remember what CC plays, but either way, like you added to your defense what you needed to do, and you added to your forward group with a very experienced and skilled player, and he's a Finnish guy, so he's going to fit into the locker room immediately just because he's got so many Finns in the locker room. He loves his Finnish guys. Absolutely does. But you shored up the question marks that you kind of had about the Stars where earlier in the season, I was like, I don't think this team can win the cup. Like they just weren't playing great, even though they had the best line in hockey, and they weren't winning games like they should. And then all of a sudden they're third in the entire NHL at the Four Nations break and in points and in the standings, and they've already made the trade. So you made your win now move, and then your next win now move, I believe, should just be Sagan and Miro coming back, and then Bishop will be back probably next week, if I had to guess. We have no updates on him, so I couldn't tell you how he's progressing through concussion protocol, how long it's going to last. I have no idea. No one said anything. Find out tomorrow when I'm at the game Friday night. See if we can get any more information.
Yeah, and I think when we were further from the trade deadline, the ascension of a bunch of like the Sam Steels, the Maverick Borgs, a bunch of our third, fourth line guys has kind of allowed you to stay put. They're playing so well, and I don't expect them to do any less. I think this is their standard now. I think if you're Jim Nill, if a deal comes across your table that you can, critique and move around that makes sense. But man, I'm just scared to lose. Like I want to keep everybody we have on this team as long as possible because the vibes in that locker room after every win, Victory Plus kind of gives you like 3 or 4 seconds in the locker room. And I've heard around the league that this is like the best chemistry around like the entire NHL, and it just doesn't make sense to interrupt that right now. Uh, but yeah, I mean, just we have a problem right now of who's to healthy scratch, and that's a good thing. Like that means that your third and fourth liners are so good, you have healthy problems, and I love it. And I would hate to give up anybody for anything at this point.
Yeah, and realistically, like a Seth Jones, Miro Heiskanen pairing in the playoffs is horrifying for every other defense, and then Thomas Harley's your second line guy. Like that is terrifying for anyone playing against the Stars in the playoffs. But realistically, it's not going to change. And like you said, the ascension of certain players that weren't playing up to standard in the first couple of months of the season has helped the Stars kind of settle in and just be like, all right, we got Mush back. Mason Marchman's back. He scored a couple of goals. He's been pretty good since coming back. And then Matt Duchene's been stellar. Like he's leading the team in points. Maverick Bork has started to come on in the last month. He's been looking pretty good. Robo obviously is one of the hottest players since the Christmas break. So 2 full months of just being one of the best goal scorers in the NHL. I mean, obviously Ovi is on a pace for 59 goals if he had played the entire season to this point, which is nuts that he's
Yeah.
going to get that record this year already. And then Rupe Hentz, he's been really good. He's got 23 goals this season. And Wyatt Johnson started coming on. Like Jamie Benn's got 15 goals. Evgeny Dadonov's got almost 20 goals at this point. I think he's got 16 or 17. Like you have scoring up and down the lineup. Sam Steele got his first goal for the first time in like 24 games or something the other night. And they just look like the cup contender that we thought they were going to look like in the beginning of the season. Obviously, all the injuries and the chaos with the lineups and the new players that they injected in free agency, and now you get the trade. It's just chaotic, and it kind of looks weird sometimes, but they play really well. The locker room's tight. That's a testament to the leaders and the coaching staff and the GM putting this team together. I really do. I think they just stand pat. I don't think they make another trade.
I try to talk myself into like a big trade just because I was hoping for it. But
We wanted it.
yeah, I think you have that Philadelphia Eagles team to where like you don't need a all pro defensive end when you have a top 10 defensive end already in your roster and he's really young. Um, do they have like the blue chips? They got a couple guys that we think are blue chips, but they have a bunch of red chips. They have a bunch of B pluses, and those B pluses are going to be on the ice against a bunch of C's in the third and fourth line, and that's where we're going to do damage.
Yeah, the third line. So morning skate this morning, they had Stankoven on the top line with Rupe and Robo, and the third line was Dadonov, Ben, and Johnston.
Filthy.
Like, I love those 2 lines together. Logan looks really good on any line that he plays. Obviously, the fourth line, he doesn't look as good because he's playing a different type of game. As a fourth line, you're grinding a little bit more. You're not able to create as much due to who your line mates are, essentially. Like Colin Blackwell and Sam Steele aren't going to strike fear into the other lineup, depending on what line is out there on the ice, but they are very, very good. And they do a lot of really good things. But you play differently on the fourth line than you do on the first line. So Stankoven on the top line, that third line's nasty. And then you got Granlund, Duchene, Mush. And then they had the fourth line of Bork, Back, Blackwell, and Steele. They had all 4 guys out there. So one of those guys is going to be a healthy scratch tomorrow. I don't know who it is. Otter was in net today for practice. So looks like we're going to get a pretty full squad against the Kings on Friday night. But before we get into that, we'll talk about the Columbus game. Columbus game was gross. It was Tuesday night. They were in Columbus. And like I said before on our last episode, that Columbus is a very good team. They play very hard and they get some sneaky goals, and they're very tough to play against. We saw that before the Four Nations break where the Stars looked like they were the better team easily. Columbus scores first, and they answer right back. And then it's 3-3 heading into the third period. It was a gross game, but Stars got the win that time. This time, Columbus kind of turned it on its head, and they scored 2 quick ones, like in the first 5 minutes. They scored the first one in, I don't know, 45 seconds and 23 seconds into the game, something like that. And it was just kind of tilted on its head immediately. The Stars didn't look as fresh as they did on the road trip in New York. And it is what it is. You got those 2 wins in New York and New Jersey, and then you kind of let in a stinker. The defense wasn't very good. Obviously, Bishop wasn't playing. It is what it is. I think it was just a tough game, and I don't think Otter was bad. I don't think he let in any bad goals. He just the Columbus Blue Jackets outplayed the Stars. Their defense, the tips, and everything that went into that game. Columbus was getting all the right bounces, and the Stars were getting all the wrong bounces, and that happens in hockey. It's just hockey.
Yeah, it felt like every time we had a bad turnover, we really paid the price.
Yep.
Uh, Outside of that, like, it was good to see them respond, and they could have just really folded, and it turned into, like, Canada and Finland, where it was I think that game ended, like, 6-1, like, that was the direction it was going, like, 2 minutes into the first period.
Yeah.
But, they just continued to stand packed, and Jamie Benn, man, I need to look again. He's close to 1,000 points. Like,
I'll look it up.
man, anytime we need a grinding, like, ugly looking score, he gets involved. Robo had a piece. I mean, uh, you're gonna lose some games like that, and I loved hearing the post. Victory Plus is awesome, and they do a great job presenting the game, but I loved
Mhm.
hearing, I think it was Duchesne saying, you know, nights like this happens and good teams will respond next one and we'll be up 2 goals in the first period. And so I love that energy that locker room's bringing, and I think that home crowd, they're gonna see a very, very fast start from the Dallas Stars tonight. But, yeah, luckily, these types of games haven't been happening that often. It felt like they were happening in spurts early in the year, but I think, we've seen really good consistent play to where you're gonna have nights like that, and I think they're few and far between from the rest of the season.
Yeah, and what you said about Duchesne, just like nights like these happen, like it's okay. I think that's a really big part of the Stars team is I haven't seen them angry in the press conferences after the game in the locker room, except for I don't know if it was angry, but it was disappointment from Matt Duchesne earlier in the season when they lost to Anaheim pretty early on, and he said we didn't come out with enough intensity for an NHL game in order to win, and I thought that was a really good quote. And he's like, they just didn't come prepared to a game against a lesser opponent. And the Stars and some other teams have some trouble playing down to their opponent's level as opposed to playing up and just playing their game. And then when they play really good teams, they play up to their level and they usually win those games. And it's frustrating as a fan or as a journalist and watching these teams. And it's frustrating for the players, I'm sure. But that mentality of never too high, never too low, like you've never seen them just like the only time I've seen someone just giddy after a game was Mason Marchment, his first game back from the injury because he scored a goal like in the first 10 minutes of the game, and he was just excited just to be playing hockey. He's been itching at the bit for those last 2 weeks of his injury. He's just trying to get back on the ice, and that's the only time I've seen someone just like outwardly uber happy, and I've never seen anyone like outwardly uber sad or mad after a game. So I think that's a big part of the game. It's just, hey, there's 82 of these things before the real one starts, and then you're going to play 30 plus games if you go to the Stanley Cup final almost. And um, yeah, it's just they're a really good team and they're really well rounded as a roster construction. But I think the locker room is huge. They all kind of have the same mentality, and they're able to bounce back from these kinds of games where it got to 4-3. They got the empty net um, goal at the end there to make it 5-3, and it was a tough game. They had their chances and they didn't execute as well as they would have. Like all of their shots were in the middle of the ice. There was no shots from the outside, like on the dots or anything like that in the circles on the outside of the goalie crease. And it was a tough game. Columbus controlled the blue line and couldn't pick it up too much. Obviously, Rupe had a pretty good game. Robo had a good game, and the Jamie Benn goal was really good. The Maverick Bork uh, goal when he just crashed into the net, into the goalie, and somehow poked it in. It was very funny. It was kind of reminiscent of Oscar Back's first goal this season. His first career goal was where he just kind of poked it and it flew up into the top shelf of the net. It was a good goal, but worked hard and was in the right place at the right time. But yeah, games like these happen and it's okay. I don't think anyone's worried about the Columbus game because Columbus is a good team. It's not like they're Anaheim or San Jose or someone like that where they're kind of a tough team, but they're just not up to your talent level. Like they got Zach Werenski and all these guys. Like they're a very good team. They just are a little bit lesser of a good team than the Dallas Stars, and you should have won that game, but it's all right.
Yeah, like, I'm taking no shame in a Columbus loss. I mean, you blink now, Columbus are scratching and clawing really, really close to that playoff line,
Mhm.
and I if you're in that era, like, I would not wanna see that team in a series, like
No, and they're playing for Johnny Gaudreau. Like they
yeah.
got that whole magic behind them this season and started off pretty early. Like they just started on a tear and all that kind of stuff. Like they've been a really good team this season. So it's not a bad loss. It's just a loss in the grand scheme of things. But Friday night against the Kings, Anze Kopitar, the newest Slovenian to come to town, I guess, after the Luka trade. It's like the most recent one, I guess. I don't know. The Kings, I think they're on like 30, 31 wins this season, maybe 32, and a little bit lesser than the Stars. And they're in a tough Pacific division with Vegas and the Oilers and all those teams. And they got a lot to deal with. And they've had that injury to Drew Doughty. And now someone else has hurt, I believe, one of their defensemen. But they're a good team. They're not a bad team. They're kind of a veteran team with younger guys that are really good. And it's not going to be an easy win, but playing in front of the home crowd, I think, is huge. They haven't played in front of the home crowd in a month. Like it'll be a full month by the time they play in AAC for the first time.
Yeah, and we need to bring it. Like, I trust me, I understand. Luca played the Mavs for the first time, and it was
Yeah.
definitely weird. And that promo, I'm talking to a Stars fan right now, but that promo was pretty good.
Yeah. No, the
But
promo was incredible. I said in the group chat, I was like, this is so good. I hate it so bad.
but I think no matter how down you are on your Mavs, and I don't see a reason to be down because like once AD gets back, like I
Yeah.
believe that you guys are gonna beat us in the playoffs. Like,
Yeah.
don't
If we
tell.
get two of those centers back this season, the Mavericks are going to be really good. We talked about it on Zero Gravity last night, and that episode's out as well, our NBA show. But yeah, I
If
think Dallas is a little bit down because of the Luka trade, like Dallas fans, the DFW Metroplex fans in general, and grabbing, like, just holding on to this team and getting invested in this team is going to do a lot of wonders for those fans to turn it around. Like when AD comes back, it's going to be great. It's going to be really good. Obviously, we saw one almost full game of AD with the Mavs, and it was really good. And everyone got kind of excited again, and then it went down immediately after he got hurt. But this Stars team has all those injuries, but they keep battling back and they keep winning games. They're third in the NHL in points. Like there's reasons to be happy in DFW in sports. The other teams, not so much. All the other teams are not very good, but the Stars are incredible. So just go watch a game. I told my barber the other day when he got a haircut, chopped a lot of it off. I feel a lot better now. It's like 70 something degrees and Dallas has started
Yep.
getting hot. So I was like, I gotta chop off the flow a little bit. Kept a little bit, but I was telling him he's a soccer guy. He goes to the FC Dallas games. He cuts the FC Dallas players a lot. And he's like, what you been doing? I was like, just been going to Stars games. And he's like, I gotta go. I was like, yes, you do. I had a buddy. I had you and Mark came to his first NHL game, and I was like, Mark, what did you think? And he's like, I love hockey. All it
Yeah,
took was one game.
absolutely. It's the most fun you'll have, and I'll be there Sunday. Like it's an environment. I mean, Mark's sitting right here, and Rupe Hint scores a goal on our side, and we know each other pretty well now, but we got to know each other really well when we're screaming next to people we've never met, high five, and that goal horn goes off, and the bing bong.
Yep.
But yeah, it's this is your team that you should be proud of, and I'm proud of the way they've battled through these injuries. And I'm just thinking about like the Seth Jones trade. Dallas gets AD, and it just like
It's
it
going to
further
work, but
it will work, but like it further proves like Dallas was just in the finals with the players they had. They had great chemistry. It gives me more confidence in the players in the Dallas Stars locker room that like I don't think we should make a move.
yeah, I mean, vibes are a huge thing in every sport. And a hockey locker room is very small in comparison to a lot of others. Like it's kind of the same size as a basketball one, and they have more players. And yeah, it's a tight knit group of guys, and you got all these Finns in the locker room that love each other, all the American guys, and you got a bunch of Canadians, obviously, but you got a mix of veteran leadership with a bunch of young guys, and everybody's looking out for each other, regardless. Like if Logan Stankoven sees someone get hit, he's going to deliver a hit to that guy, and he's 5'8". He's the smallest guy on the ice every night, and he's backing up his guys. Obviously, Dumba backed up Bischel the other night, and yeah, I don't think they should make a trade. Obviously, we talked about trades for months now at this point, 3 full months of this podcast, and we've been talking about trades, trades, trades. We got our trade. We got Granlund. We got CC. You shored up 2 things that you were pretty questionable on the team, and now you really look like a Stanley Cup contender because your big hitters are actually hitting now. Like Robo, Wyatt, Rupe. It's just consistency across the board. And the depth is even bigger and better than it was last season. I think the defense is way better than it was last season when everybody comes back healthy. There's not a lot of questions on this team anymore. I don't think there is any questions, really, other than when are they coming back from injury. That's the only question that is left now.
You're lucky if you have one player, like a younger player, really have a shining season. The Dallas Stars had arguably like 3 or 4 players like really prove themselves at the NHL level. Um, that doesn't happen that often, and I think that's the reason why Jim Neal does not make. I'm booking it right now. I don't think he makes a move at the deadline.
I did see a stat the other day. Someone compared Wyatt Johnston's first how many ever games to Nathan MacKinnon's first how many ever games. I don't know how many games they played at this point, Wyatt. And they pulled those games and the points scored. It's significantly more than Nathan MacKinnon's. And I know Nathan MacKinnon didn't like burst onto the scene. Like it was his 3rd or 4th season that he was in the league that he just like was one of the best players in hockey. Not saying Wyatt Johnston's going to do that, but he's already ahead of pace of what MacKinnon was doing. I think Wyatt can be your top line center. I think he can be your captain in how many ever years after Jamie Benn leaves. I think he can be 100-point guy whenever he just has a really good season, just like Robo did 2 years ago. And you just have kind of everything on this squad. So I don't want to make a trade. I just want to stand put. I want to wait on Miro. I want to wait on Tyler. And I want Bischel back next week. And I just want to run it. I just want to run it and see, because there's just no way Winnipeg does this in the playoffs, because you can't win all of these games in a row in February and then expect to be still the best team in hockey in April, May, June. Like, just doesn't seem right. The Stars peaked last season heading into the playoffs. The last 17 games, I think they had points in, and one had a big winning streak going into the playoffs, and they played really well in the first 3 series, obviously, but they played 3 Western Conference Finals opponents, essentially. They played 3 Western Conference Finals in a row. So they kind of ran out of gas. And I think this year you can recoup. You can find the Russian gas in the locker room somewhere. I think someone's going to have a really good series, and the next series it's going to be a different guy, and the next series it's going to be a different guy. And that's the testament of the Dallas Stars. Depth, Jim Neal, just a masterclass.
Yeah, yeah. And, just across like the national hockey scene, Dallas will always get overlooked. But
Yep.
even saying that, our 4th line and 3rd line get severely overlooked. And this season will be the last season, because God, our guys are so young and so talented. Just imagine in 2-3 years what a Wyatt Johnston looks like, what, Steele and Blackwell, like Harley, like we're in good company.
Yeah. And I remember Spittin' Chicklets, I don't know how many months ago it was, but they had a fan chirping Biz and Witt about scoring 20 goals in a season. Like, this guy should just score 20 goals every season. And they were like, I don't think you understand how hard it is to score 20 goals in one NHL season, regardless of the player. Like, obviously, McDavid, McKinnon, all these guys are going to score a lot of goals. And that's kind of where the product of who they are and what roster they have around them as well. Jamie Benn has 15 goals this season. He's in his mid-30s. He's been the captain forever. He's been in the league for 15 years. He's got 15 goals. He's going to probably hit 20 by the end of the season. He had 30 last season. Like, what he's doing right now is impeccable. Tyler Seguin was on a point per game rate before he went down with injury. Like, the older guys, and Matt Duchene's obviously over a point per game just slightly, and the older guys just carrying the water, chopping the wood for the younger guys. And you're like, look, if you need a little help, I got you. Don't worry about it. I got this one. And that is just impeccable team building. And if you're a Dallas fan in any sport, just look at the Stars and be like, man, I really wish my team was really well run and had a great team and great locker room and favorite players and all that kind of stuff. Just go to the Stars. Go watch them. Watch them on TV. It's free on Victory Plus. It's completely free. You can just download the app. If you live in DFW, put in your zip code, and all of a sudden you're just watching Stars games every night. You can just go watch for free. And if you want to, go to a game. It will change your perspective of sports and what your favorite sport is. hockey has become probably my favorite sport to watch. Maybe outside of basketball. I grew up a basketball head and just love basketball, but hockey is my favorite sport to watch in person by far. Not even
Yeah,
close.
I mean,
So just be a Stars fan.
when I took Mark, it was his first NHL game, and even he said, like, "Dude, like, it's good on TV," and he got into the Four Nations, but it's unlike anything in person. And this team is like, it's very rare you have a GM that hits on draft picks, and usually like I'll take that in a GM, but to hit on draft picks and get really good contracts like Jim Nill's able to get, like, we are blessed in Dallas, and even though I'm in Houston, we're blessed in Houston to have a GM like that's on the level of Jim Nill. I mean, he's just incredible, and he's done such a good job. You don't have to waste your time at the trade deadline. Just
No.
just run it.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised if they make a trade. I'll find out over the next week, and we'll be back early next week to kind of preview it. And then trade deadline day on Friday, we will be going live on Apollo HOU's YouTube. So hit that subscribe button wherever you are subscribed on YouTube, whether it's your phone, your iPad, your laptop, or your desktop. Like, just go hit the subscribe button. It's free, doesn't do you any harm. And we'll be live on Friday afternoon next week for the trade deadline, but we'll be back earlier in the week to preview and recap some games and talk a little bit of trade deadline chatter if there is any more chatter to be had. Shout out to our sponsor, Zing Zang, #1 Bloody Mary mix in America. We love Zing Zang over here. They got the ready to drink cans. They got the mix if you want to make your own drinks. It's easy. It's great. We love Zing Zang. #1 Bloody Mary mix in America. And shout out to Prize Picks. Use code Apollo when you download the app Prize Picks and get up to $100 matched on your first deposit. So if you're putting in $100, they'll give you $100 right back. It's nice and easy. Go win some money with Prize Picks using code Apollo when you sign up. Shout out to you, Dom. Shout out to our listeners and viewers on YouTube. We'll be back very, very soon with another episode of Clean Sheet of Ice, the Texas Hockey Podcast.